Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear listeners, Jazakullahu Khairun for joining us for the Monday night discussion. Alhamdulillah, I have with me Brother Iqbal Hussein and Dr. Jawad. All three of us, inshallah, will be hosting tonight's program. And we have our guest, Brother Hassan Shibly, from CAIR, Florida. Many of you know him as CAIR, Florida director. He'll be joining us in the next few minutes. And inshallah, for those of you who do not know about him, he's a graduate of New York University of New York, Buffalo, and top of his graduate is the top of his class from the Buffalo Law School. He has worked with various legal organizations, including the Muslim Advocates, National Lawyers Guild, Erie County Family Court, Erie County Bar Association, etc. But he's been serving for many years with CAIR, Florida, and he has appeared numerous times in national media outlets, including CNN, NPR, Voice of America, New York Times, Toronto Star, Buffalo News, and also Fox. Maybe you have seen him in one of those interviews there. So he'll be joining us in the next few minutes, inshallah. And Brother Iqbal, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Yeah.
What is the first thing that comes to your mind today that you want to discuss, that you feel you as a community member, and then Dr. Jawad, the question goes to you after that, you are interested in learning on this topic, and what would like Brother Hassan to shed light on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in, obviously in these times with COVID going on and all that, a lot of activity, a lot of anti-Muslim activity has continued to happen to some degree, but has dropped off in other ways. But with the upcoming election, where Muslims are generally always painted as a scapegoat, I'm really interested in trying to hear from him what he thinks about, how we should be ready for what may happen in terms of any villainification of Muslims in general, and then also how we can advocate more for ourselves in this upcoming election cycle, and with all the businesses starting to reopen, and then pretty soon, they're expecting a second wave of this to happen. How is that going to affect some of the civil rights situations that have occurred historically for Muslims, and how we can be best prepared for some of that, and if anything interesting that has happened during these kind of odd times due to COVID. So those are kind of what's on top of my head for him.
Jazakallahu Khair. Dr. Jawad, from a psychiatric or psychological perspective, what do you see is like the number one driving force, based on what Brother Iqbal mentioned, for hate? What makes people hate their fellow citizens, and what creates that fear and hate?
Jazakullahu Khairun. So one of the things that we normally see, the idea of hate is nothing that is new. Obviously, it's been around since basically the beginning of man, and that this tendency is primarily unknown. So there's some uncertainty, and with that fear, and to light that match, that fear can then become full on hate, because when you don't know something and someone says a few things to you to light that match and to maybe add fuel to that fire, and all of a sudden that uncertainty or unknowingness of a certain entity can now become full hate without much work. And governments throughout the history of man have used this as a tool to control their populace, and in today's day and age, it's no different. Playing on the psychology of human beings to drive a certain agenda. And I think Brother Hassan can really shed light as to how Iqbal had mentioned. I think one of the things that people use Islam and Muslims as a sort of a foil to hate, right? And to create this fear. And that drives voter turnout on Trump's side, on the Republican side. And we need to figure out how can we use that same drive to get Muslims to turn out. And I would contend that there's a fear of, to be honest, I think there's a fear of voting, not because there's a fear of voting, because so how to get voter turnout, my question for Hassan would be how to overcome this fear of the unknown, because a lot of Muslims don't vote because they don't know the process. And I'm very curious to see how we can sort of engage the Muslims this year. Like Iqbal said, because of the pandemic, I think it would be very nice to see from Brother Hassan to see how we can really turn up our voter turnout this year, because our impact may be more widely felt because less people will vote this year if you look at some of the predictions and models. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Additionally,
MashaAllah. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. You came at the right time. May Allah accept your salah and just because he's an hour ahead of us, which is praying Maghrib. Alhamdulillah. So Jazakallahu Khair, Brother Hassan. We gave an interview. We gave your introduction in your absence. And Alhamdulillah, we're honored to have you here today with us virtually, inshallah. And hopefully you're going to be joining us in Chicago, you told me, right?
Inshallah ta'ala.
Right. So what we talked about right now, one of the things the brothers wanted to say is a few minutes, if you could just share a little bit about yourself and your work with CAIR.
Maybe take them onto the.
I'm sorry?
I think it just had a bad connection. So yeah, if you could, inshallah, just start off with kind of giving us an overview of with the work that you do, mashallah, with CAIR and a little bit of background there, that would be great, inshallah.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa sayyidina Muhammad abduhu wa rasuluh. Jazakullahu Khairun. It's a tremendous honor to join you for this critical conversation, inshallah. In terms of myself, subhanAllah, I was born in Syria. I came to the US when I was 4 years old. And to be honest, growing up, I always wanted to be a pilot. And that was my dream until I experienced something that unfortunately far too many members of the Muslim community have experienced. And that was when I was attending an Islamic conference when I was 18 years old, the RIS conference in Toronto. We were coming back. And when we got to the border, they told my mother to go in for a random inspection. The US Customs told her, go in for a random inspection. My mom said, what do you mean random? And I joked. I said, Mama, random means they saw your hijab. But I was joking. I didn't think that would be the reality. And yet when I woke up my siblings and we walked into the secondary point of inspection at the US Customs and Border Patrol Center, I was shocked at what I saw. Basically, I saw my local masjid. I saw the entire room was filled with no one but Muslims. About 40 members of the Muslim community had been so-called randomly selected. And we were all held at the border for about 6-7 hours. And we were threatened, we were interrogated, we were fingerprinted, we were photographed, we were treated like criminals. We were treated as suspects. We were treated as the other. We were treated as second-class citizens. And that went against everything I believed in when it came to the US Constitution, which expressly prohibits the government from treating people different on account of their religion. And that was a big wake-up call for me because, as a Syrian American growing up as an immigrant, I think I always took the freedom we had in the US for granted and didn't realize the importance of investing to protect our freedom and civil rights in the US. And it was a wake-up call because I realized that this fear of the Muslim community that resulted in government-sanctioned discrimination would make us less safe and less free. It makes us less free because there's a lot of Muslims that, unfortunately, when they feel the government is targeting them, are afraid to express their faith. And hiding your faith doesn't work, But it also makes us less safe because the government misses the real criminals when they focus on the Muslim community. And a man who killed an entire family in Canada that night made it across the border with the bloody weapons in his car. But he was a white Christian American, so they didn't stop him. So that was a turning point, and I decided to focus on protecting the Muslim community, decided to become a civil rights lawyer. And I was extremely grateful when I finished law school to have the opportunity to work with the organization of CAIR. In my situation, I work for CAIR Florida, the Florida chapter. And CAIR is an institution that is basically a voice and a shield for the Muslim community. Our focus is presenting a sense of safety and security and protection for the Muslim community. So for the last 10, 15 years, we've been suing the government to put an end to this illegal targeting of Muslims at the border. And in fact, last year, alhamdulillah, after almost 15 years of work, we won a major lawsuit where the federal court actually found that the watch list, which targets Muslims, is unconstitutional, is illegal, what we've been saying all along. So CAIR protects the Muslim community from harassment by the government, from harassment at the border, from harassment by the FBI, but we also protect Muslims from harassment and discrimination at their workplace. One of the first cases I worked on at CAIR, alhamdulillah, was the case of about a dozen Moroccan Muslim men who were actually fired from their job as taxi drivers because on their break, they did their salah and their employer fired them, and we sued him and we taught him a big lesson, well, alhamdulillah, that you can't fire Muslims for exercising their right to pray in their break. Just as you allow Christians to read the Bible in their break, you should allow Muslims to do their salah in their break. Finally, we also protect our Muslim sisters, some of whom, there was a Muslim sister very recently who was arrested for whatever reason it was, but when she was arrested, and it's very easy to get arrested in this country. If you forget to pay a parking ticket, you could get arrested. When they arrested her, they removed the hijab and they put that picture all over the internet. So alhamdulillah, now we're about to sue them, and we've already gotten them, even before suing them, to agree to change their policy to respect the hijab of Muslims. We've represented Muslim doctors and people who work at the hospital who were fired or given a hard time because they wear the hijab. So our goal really, I mean, to be frank, it's to make sure no Muslim has an excuse not to practice the deen in the United States, to make sure that every legal protection is there for those who want to practice their deen, such that no one has an excuse. So, I really, as I would say in my CAIR trainings, that Allah is with us and then the law is with us. The law protects our freedom to practice our religion in the US, but you can't take that freedom for granted because the enemies of Islam are spending hundreds of millions of dollars attacking our freedom to practice our faith. Likewise, we should invest in protecting our freedom to practice our faith. And we also do a lot of media work to ensure that Islam is better represented and the Muslim community is better represented in the media. Last year, CAIR Florida, we did over $100 million worth of positive media coverage, alhamdulillah, for the Muslim community. And finally, we work with the government to change anti-Muslim policies and to promote positive policies to fight anti-Muslim legislation and promote justice. And the last thing I will say, inshallah, and then take inshallah more questions, is we really want to be advocates of justice for everyone. So in Florida, 25% of our clients are not Muslims, because when people are oppressed, we want them to know that they can come to the Muslim community to help them and protect them. But alhamdulillah, at the end of the day, CAIR Florida is an organization to protect our youth against bullying, to protect Muslims from harassment from the FBI, from discrimination. It's the protection of the Muslim community. That is the bottom line of it. And it's an honor to be a part of such an organization that can make it easy for our ulama, our mashayikh, our du'at, to do the real work of sharing the beauty of our deen in these lands.
Jazakallahu Khairun, mashallah. Sounds great. I have a question before Iqbal and my co-host can ask stuff. We have Dr. Jawad here, who's a psychiatrist, Brother Iqbal Hussain, who has IT business, and he's one of our, both our mustallis of our masjid. One thing, when I see you send these videos, Brother Hassan, I'm on your list. So I receive your videos. What was that? What was the other one? What was the one about, just making sure we don't get into jail. You have sent a few of those, right? And right outside of the jail, you've sent some powerful videos, know your rights, etc. How did you how did you convince your parents to allow you to do this type of work? Because what I see, I don't know too much about the Arab community, but I know from the Indo-Pak community, parents are not willing to, for the most part, allow their kids to do this type of work because they fear that the repercussions of this are going to hit their family. They're afraid for their children's life and all that type of stuff. So they don't really allow them to, it's not a very common thing to see practicing Muslim kids, out on the streets protesting for against police brutality or speaking up loudly and speaking to news media. It's not a really common thing. You agree with that?
It is far too uncommon, and alhamdulillah, it's always rewarding where after I do some of my trainings and my programs, some parents or some youth come up to me and they say, you know, my child wanted to be a lawyer and I wasn't going to let them. But now after seeing the work you all do, you know, I'm proud to let them, you know, to support them to study law. And to be honest, my parents, well, alhamdulillah, they've been tremendous supporters throughout my education. Alhamdulillah, I mean, they funded my law school education. I'm very grateful for that. As I was growing up as an American Muslim, you know, my parents were raised in Syria. In Syria, and this is why I say in America, we have more freedom to practice Islam than most Muslim majority countries. Because in Syria, there was a time they ripped off the hijab off of Muslim women. In Syria, my father was thrown in jail because he was going to the masjid too frequently and they wanted to interrogate him. And alhamdulillah, Allah saved him. And now we see the hundreds of thousands that have been killed by the Syrian government. So of course, there is a fear in challenging authority. There's even a fear of sticking out as a Muslim. So, you know, I love my father and he's been a tremendous influence on me in terms of studying the deen, studying the faith, spirituality, and speaking out for justice. He's always taught me to speak out for justice for the oppressed. That was the message of what our faith is about that he sort of imbued within me. But even he would give me a hard time, to be honest, in terms of being very visible as a Muslim, you know, growing out my beard, wearing a kufi. I, like many immigrant children, were discouraged from doing that, not because of anything evil, but because they saw what happened in the Middle East. If you grow out your beard, you'd end up in a jail. You know, you would face unjust oppression. So there was hesitancy and it was conflict. And there were nights I would fall asleep crying because of the conflicts I would have with my father in regards to growing out the beard. And he felt that it would open the door for me to be abused or held back or not successful. And I told him, you know, as our Mashaykh taught us, my father is definitely a man of faith, that, you know, you're not going to lose when you try to emulate the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even if we're not worthy of it. And alhamdulillah, as they saw the work that I do, and this is the amazing thing, a lot of Muslims think if you challenge the FBI, you challenge CBP, you challenge the police, they're going to target you and they're going to hurt you. Wallahi, my experience shows it's the opposite. Just today, one of the top law enforcement officers in Florida called me and he's like, Hassan, I just want to remind you, if you guys ever have any issues, just call us. We will fix it right away. We love you and we support the good work you're doing, even in holding us accountable. The head of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and I always make videos telling people, don't speak to U.S. Customs and Border Protection without a lawyer. The head of Customs calls me and said, you know what, if I ever need a lawyer, I'd want you to be a lawyer. So I will say this to answer your question. Alhamdulillah, when my parents saw the success we've had, even amongst the government, even amongst the leadership, amongst the different religions in speaking truth to power, they became very proud and were very supportive. Alhamdulillah. It's just about understanding the legal system and then putting our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In America, you earn respect by holding the government accountable, not by trying to appease corrupt officers. We challenge those that are corrupt, and those who are good-hearted within the government actually respect and honor and support our work. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, that's a blessing of being here in America, right? We have that opportunity. So I have a question regarding, like, you know, in line with what Mufti Azim was speaking about. I was wondering, like, what do you think we can do to help encourage our children to go down a path of trying to not only help the Muslims, right, but also help all people who are oppressed? I mean, in terms of encouraging them, what are the opportunities that are there? I know you guys have internships, and like, what other things would you suggest? I mean, as you know, I'm a father of a 13-year-old right now, and I have other kids, younger kids as well. What's a good idea for me to help them understand the importance of this, and how can I encourage them into going into something like this?
Sure. So with the children, you know, I'm very grateful that my father, you know, very much took me as a friend growing up. You know, he would often go to different lectures, different protests. I remember going to protests in DC with my father as a child against the Iraq War. You know, we would be on the bus together with the community. He would take me to churches where he would give da'wah and share them the beauty of the deen. And he would have conversations with me about these issues. And I'll never forget the words that my father told me, which is, he said, Hassan, in the West, you know, your life doesn't just belong to you. It belongs to this deen and this community. And when people see you, they will judge the deen by your actions. And we don't want to tell people what Islam isn't, but we should show them what it is through service. And the big blessing is, alhamdulillah, my father had a strong relationship with his sheikh in Syria, and that really influenced a beautiful representation of the deen. Having the ta'alluq, the connection with the ulama, the people who day and night, what's on their mind is how they can get close to Allah, and they've devoted their life to that. when we who are not ulama have that connection with them, it opens up so much doors of khair. So the fact that my father had that strong connection with the ulama opened up a good door. Alhamdulillah, then Allah gave us the tawfiq to benefit from our mashayikh in Buffalo as well. So just have these conversations with the children. Take them out. Let them see the work in action. Befriend them. And remember, deen and compulsion is like oil and water. As long as there's pressure there, it'll be mixed. But the minute the pressure is removed, it'll separate. And if you try, and I've seen this happen, I've had parents come to me whose daughters have run away from them, and they're adult, they're 19, 20-year-old daughters, and they've run away. And how can I get her back? I said, unfortunately, there's no legal way you can force your daughter back. And now, a'udhu billah, she's in a bad environment, wrong situation. You cannot have the deen be from compulsion. It has to be built from love, from tazkiyah, from ihsan, from encouragement, and believe in our children and empower them to take steps to have an impact in whatever their passion is. It may be through through da'wah, through education, through law, through the sciences. There's always a good way to channel that into service for the deen, driven by love of Allah and achieving Allah's love through service to his creation, and defeating Islamophobia by showing people the beauty of what our deen is and how it can serve them and how it can uplift them.
Subhanallah, mashallah, Jazakullahu Khair, Hassan, brother Hassan. So this is my name is Jawad. First of all, I was really excited when I heard that we're gonna get a chance to talk to you, because I know how busy you are, and I've never had a chance. I've watched probably every video of yours, but I never had a chance, obviously, to tell you that subhanallah, the things that you guys are doing, the things that CAIR has done, the things that you have done, it's so very greatly appreciated by the community. And I wanted to have an opportunity to tell you that directly, because subhanallah, I don't know how many du'as you've received, subhanallah, from so many different people around the world.
Alhamdulillah.
Who are watching videos, who are benefiting. And wallahi, this is amazing work you guys are doing. And I may God that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate you 1,000 levels in Jannah for every second you spent on the community. It's just beautiful work. So we encourage you, and that's kind of the question that I had, which is that I always feel this, whenever I seek anything CAIR related, I feel a sense of guilt, and I'll tell you why. Because I feel like I'm not doing enough to support it, the organization, because it's the only thing, the only organization, only institution that really speaks in the manner which in which it does for us Muslims. And I feel so. My question really is, what is the best way that we can support you guys? Because I'm wondering what Hassan goes through when he has a down moment and he's thinking, I need help. Right? He's like, I don't have any enough people on the ground. I don't have maybe enough volunteers at this rally or that rally, or I don't have enough manpower to put this thing together to hold this event. So what goes through your mind? And then us, obviously we're in Chicago, you're in Florida, but what can we do in our local chapter other than donations, which I think obviously is an obvious thing? What else can we do to help CAIR thrive?
It's a very, very important question. And I always just encourage people to build genuine relationships with the people doing this work. So I will tell you this, we're trying our best, and sometimes we make mistakes, or sometimes we maybe do the right thing, but people don't know the facts, the actual accurate facts. And sometimes, subhanAllah, it's very easy to criticize. And what I always wonder is, these people that criticize, why don't they just call us and help us or advise us? So that my number one advice for everybody is just get to know your local CAIR leaders. They're trying their best. And listen, sometimes they're right. Sometimes they could have done some things better, Wallahu musta'an, but they are your brothers, they are your sisters, and they're trying their best for the sake of Allah. So just have that relationship, get to know them, break bread with them. Really, people genuinely, they usually only call us when there's an emergency. And Allah knows the situation. We're always responding to emergencies. But or sometimes people call us just with advice, but without the support to how to execute that advice. So, as my sheikh said, we don't like to take advice without support for how to execute that advice. Try to, just give a call and say, this is what, we can do to support. How can we support you? Just build a local relationship. The fundraising, yes, it is important. If every Muslim in America donated to their local CAIR chapter, the CAIR Federation would have $1 billion a year to fight Islamophobia. If every Muslim just did $1 a day. So I don't want to belittle the financial support. That's important, but just be, we're accessible, and just build that relationship, and don't necessarily wait for somebody to call you to build that relationship. I want people to understand the one thing you asked me, what do I think about And the thing I think about is the work of defending the Muslim community politically and legally. It's not CAIR's job, it's every Muslim's job. You know, CAIR is just an institution to do that work. So take ownership of it. Come with solutions, come with support, be friends. But I will tell you this, what you told me, it almost brought tears to my eyes about the fact of du'as. Man, we are so grateful for the du'as, the ibadah. Every time somebody prays tahajjud safely, every time somebody walks out in, representing the sunnah, goes to the masjid to pray and makes dua for us, well, alhamdulillah, that's mercy for us, because at least our work is worthwhile. Because what actually on a personal level, subhanallah, when we're, constantly from the time we wake up till the time we go to sleep, we're on the phone. I just left a meeting just before this rush to pray Maghrib. I was meeting with a family that was targeted by the FBI. Every day there's a new crisis, and unfortunately, and it's our own shortcoming, but we don't have as much time for the ibadah that we enjoy doing, that we wish we could do. And you feel the effect on the heart. So that's no excuse. I always try to do whatever we could to get more benefit from the ulama and time with the ulama. But then I also have hope that maybe even if we're falling a little bit short in the nawafil and the extra ibadahs that we wish we could do, maybe it's, if you're doing that ibadah and then you make dua for the people who are doing the work, and if Allah allows us to be partners in that, to the barakah of your tahajjud, maybe Allah will give us tawfiq. It doesn't excuse our shortcomings, but that's my hope, because really we're all trying our best. And there's limited time in the day, to be honest with you. So just make us partners in your ibadah. That's what I would ask.
Allah, that's beautiful. Oh my God, that's beautiful, Hassan. And what I would say to everyone listening, please make a khas dua for Hassan, his family, his offspring, his parents. We are very blessed to have leaders in the community such as yourself. And wallahi, all of us, we have made dua for you on many occasions. Every time we see your video, because we realize what you're doing. And I think for everyone listening, one of the things, I'm a psychiatrist, so obviously I'm thinking it from this angle. So what this is going to give you, like, why are you taking it down this road? But what I will say is that, we need to give our leaders a boost. They're not infallible. They can get tired. Hassan looks really good, mashallah, in his videos. He looks very well rested, and the beard is looking tight, Hassan, every time I see you. But what I'll say is, he's a human being, and he's going to get tired. Ahmed Rehab in Chicago, he's going to get tired, and they need to hear our support. I think from a psychiatry standpoint, I look at it that way. I say, what can we do to prop up our leaders and make them, just give them that extra push when it's 7:30, 8 p.m. They're still in the office and they're having that low energy and they need a little bit of fuel. Someone's message, someone's dua will really lift them up. So I know you didn't ask for this, Hassan. I'm just saying this on my own, that I would like all of us here to really, from our hearts, make dua for them, for what they do for us. And so anyways, I'll stop there before Mutazim gets mad at me.
It means a lot. Jazakallahu Khairun.
I think that's so beautiful. Okay, I want to take it segue into the next thing. How do you get rid of this? Maybe I can ask every single person I interview and ask them the same thing. How do you remove apathy from the Muslim community and simply just give them a maqsad and a purpose to do something, be it humanitarian effort, be it civil rights, be it madrasa work, whatever it is? How do you get them motivated? How are you been working?
Allahu Akbar. We have some business leaders in Florida. We took them with us, alhamdulillah, to visit Kenya. And in Kenya, and if you're in a position of privilege and traveling, this is something that should be utilized for khair, because subhanAllah, when we visited the people in Kenya, we asked them what their needs were. We visited an orphanage. When we asked them what their needs were, they said, we couldn't afford to pay our orphan caretakers that are taking care of all these orphans full time. Said, how much is their salary? Their salary was $50 a month. Which one of us cannot spare $50 to support the full salary of an orphan caretaker? We are so privileged that even the poorest of us, if we can save $20 and use it, we can use that $20 to basically $25 support 2 weeks of full-time salary for someone taking care of orphans. There isn't any one of us that cannot have a powerful impact. We just have to find which ways can we have those impacts. And alhamdulillah, when we travel, when we see what's happening out there in the world, just look at, that's just one example from a humanitarian perspective of how far our money can go supporting certain causes. Another area that we can look at here in the US is how hard the enemies of Islam are working. What motivates me is when I see Islamophobes spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars to demonize Islam, to ban Islam, to attack Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I ask myself the question, Do they hate the deen more than I love the deen? Do they hate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than I love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Are they working more for their hatred of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam than we're working for our love? Because if they are, then we should be ashamed, and that should inspire us to work harder. So, I saw that Pamela Geller, she gave an award of $10,000 to whoever draws a cartoon insulting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the most. So she's willing to spend $10,000 out of her hatred. When did we spend $10,000 out of our love? And subhanAllah, like I know, for example, in Chicago, you have Dar es Salaam, an institution that's replicating the image of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where, every time they attack the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, inshallah, we will bring up 50, 100 young men who will represent the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam properly. Support those causes, support your madrasas, support your Islamic institutions. Don't let the enemies of Islam spend more out of hatred than you will spend out of your love. That's my message on how we motivate.
Allah.
Mashallah, mashallah. Yeah, I mean, I think that, Brother Hassan, this is something I struggle with, because like when we have fundraisers for our masjid here and for anything, I always tell people, okay, whatever, if all you can afford is $1, I have no problem, just give that. But I want to see participation. I don't want the 5%, paying for 95% of the stuff. I want to get everyone. I know 5% is going to give the major bulk of it, but we still want everyone to feel, whether we're raising money for orphans, whether it's for CAIR, whether it's for electricity expense at your local masjid. I find it just, I feel like a lot of people, or not a lot, majority of people just sit back, and to get them involved seems to be really, really tough. And I think, when people don't support CAIR, because I was told that CAIR, in some masajid, for example, many masjids are not open to their fundraising, and they have a hard time raising money. I said, subhanAllah, what's wrong with people? I mean, they're doing, just to hire one lawyer is going to cost you, the retainer for that is going to be so much. Then how many other meetings with the FBI and this, that, out of pocket will be thousands. And here CAIR is offering all of this service for free. And why do people have a hard time supporting that? So that's just ilallah al-mushtaka. I don't know. Dr. Jawad, you want to share anything on this aspect of just getting people to
yeah, I think mashallah, I mean,
participate. You know what I'm saying?
No, and I think mashallah, Hassan hit it right on the head too. I mean, a lot of this idea that, I love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what have you done, right? What have you done? What action have you taken? And I think to frame it in that framework is really good, because I like what Hassan said, because if you think about it, every single day we're working against, there's a gradient pushes, there's a wave pushing against us. And that wave is getting stronger and stronger. And I think with the last 4 years of this presidency, we've seen the emboldenment of that wing of the American populace. And I think Hassan could probably shed more light on this, but that, when we see these far right groups being emboldened and being outright in front of you and openly, bragging about their hate, it reminds me of like when we talk about a fasik or a fajr, where they sin, but they openly disregard it as a sin. And here you have people who are hating, and they openly advertise this hate. And subhanAllah, and I think when Hassan was saying that, I was thinking, why are we worried about openly advertising our deen? And these people are openly advertising their hate, So I'm sure Hassan can add to that.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, this whole idea of be proud of your identity, and we're going to be very sensitive, but to be frank, we see now men, they are not ashamed to go out dressed as women. And yet, why? Because that is what they identify with, and everybody will support them, and you will get in a lot of trouble if you were to criticize them. And yet, you as a man are afraid to dress like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or at least grow a lihya like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How can people, subhanAllah, be proud to dress in all sorts of strange ways that reflect their desires or their affiliation, and or they're not ashamed to be identified as white supremacists, and they yell out white power, and they're not afraid to be identified as racists or Islamophobes. They're not ashamed of that, but we're going to be ashamed of associating with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No, never. We should be stronger in our love. And even I draw inspiration from some of our colleagues of the Sikh faith. I mean, they are not ashamed to wear a turban, proud of their identity and their faith. Likewise, why are we then ashamed? How can people be more comfortable in their lifestyle that's not on haqq than we are with our haqq? We cannot allow that to happen. And I will say this, when it comes to CAIR in particular, the Prophet ﷺ, since his time, there was the effort of spending to defend the Muslim community and protect our faith. Do we think that's just over in our time? We don't think that. There's literally people in the US that have the ear of the president who wish they could outlaw Islam. They literally tried to pass laws that practicing Islam is treason, punishable by 20 years in jail. And alhamdulillah, CAIR helped defeat that. We, alhamdulillah, literally helped liberate an imam who was facing 20 years in jail in Orlando because he was allegedly a terrorist, and the only evidence they had was his possession of Islamic literature and his teaching the Quran. So the effort to ban Muslims has not stopped. To outlaw Islam hasn't stopped. It still happens. What are we doing from our annual income, from our monthly income, from our net worth? What are we spending to defend the deen? And I genuinely cannot think of a better institution in the US that is committed to that, despite whatever shortcomings or mistakes we may make for that cause. So I encourage everybody, don't wait. If you have a message, if you have an institution, don't wait for CAIR to call you to ask for a fundraiser. Be proactive. You know, the Prophet ﷺ said the greatest of the beloved deeds to Allah is entering happiness into the hearts of the believers. Wallahi, we have had imams call us in the middle of the night because the FBI is harassing them. And we are honored. We're grateful that they think of us and Allah is using us to protect them. But how many times have we gotten a call from an imam saying, not because the FBI is bothering them or because they're getting stopped at the border, but just calling us to say, you know what, I want you to come fundraise at our masjid. It happens very rarely. May Allah reward the imam that do that. But the majority of the calls we get is for our purpose, which is the FBI is bothering me. But if we want to be having the strength to protect you when the FBI is there, we need the resources. So may Allah bless our community. We're honored that you call us when our help is needed against the FBI, against customs. But likewise, enter the happiness into the hearts of the leaders of these organizations by calling them when there is no need and you just want to support them, invite them to fundraise, or just invite them to train your community as well. You know, what makes us happy is when people listen to the advice, because it breaks my heart. I've been saying for the last 10 years, don't talk to the FBI without a lawyer, and we still hear it happening. So if somebody calls us to tell us that the FBI is there and they didn't speak to them because they want us to help them, we're happy then too. So call us, not just when you need us, but call us to build that relationship and to support the effort so we can protect others.
Allahu Akbar, mashallah. Brother Hassan,
go ahead.
So you know, all of these points, mashallah, that you're making, I think they all ring very true. And I think, you know, this is another election year. There's another, you know, we've always been, Muslims, minorities have generally always been something of a punching bag as we get closer and closer to election time. What do you think, like, Muslims and others can do to help prepare for what may be coming, in terms of being, you know, Muslims being kind of a scapegoat? And then also, what do you think that just the general community should be doing in order to be advocating more on behalf of Muslims in general? Is there something that we can do, that we can start, you know, like you were talking about relationships with CAIR? Definitely need to do that. What else do you think? Do you think we should be talking more to our elected officials? What's beneficial in your experience for Muslim communities?
Yes, we need to build relationships with elected officials, but not as individuals for photo ops or for personal gain, which frankly is a lot of what happens within our community. You know, a wealthy individual may invite a congressman to his home, they raise them some money, they take pictures, and it's not part of an institutional effort. It's not part of a community effort, and it's just for personal gain and photo ops, and they don't take us seriously and they laugh at us. But rather, it should be connected with institutions, PACs, political action committees, and other organizations that can hold these elected officials accountable, and we earn the respect. Now, I'll tell you, we've been successful in Florida in the sense that, alhamdulillah, because we built a strong civil rights organizations, we're at the forefront of a lot of the pressing issues of the day. So whenever there's conversations about racism, police brutality, the mayor, the head of police, they're calling us. Over there, we see a lot of the elected officials. We've earned their trust and their respect. Just last week, one of the leading candidates for judge came to my house because he wanted the support of the Muslim community. Now, of course, at CAIR, we're nonpartisan. We can't tell you what to vote, but in a personal level, I did a Facebook live stream to educate the community about who he is. It's very, very important that we are on the map, and you become on the map when you're not just looking out for your own personal issues like Islamophobia, but when we have the ability to address other community issues. So at CAIR, when a Black person faces racism, the NAACP sends him to CAIR Florida for us to help. So when you're able to help broader issues, you will have the ears of elected officials on broader issues as well. Secondly, it's very, very, very important that we are all registered to vote. One day I was thinking, I really wish I could have taken, that somebody could just take bay'ah on voting. And I know some people say even are against voting, but to the point is, the sheriff can make all the difference. Like the sheriff alone can decide the policy if they remove the hijab of Muslim prisoners or not. Well, that's a lot of power. The judge can decide to execute somebody or not. It's a lot of power. The school board can decide whether anti-Muslim books or accurate books about Islam are taught in the schools. It's a lot of power. The county commission, the city council, they can decide whether your masjid gets a permit to open or not. It's a lot of power. And that's why I'm very frustrated with Muslims that are against voting or that simply are too lazy to vote and don't vote, because what happens is anti-Muslim people get in power that do a lot of injustice, and then we have to clean up the mess at CAIR when our masjid isn't getting authorization to open, or when they're promoting anti-Muslim literature. So it's like people, they are part of the problem, but they're not part of the solution. They won't vote for a good person, and when the bad person gets in power and is banning hijab in jails, I don't see those people who are against voting suing them or funding the effort to protect our Muslim sisters. So I take personal offense at the people that are against voting, and I really encourage everybody, take voting seriously, because who's elected can really affect countless lives. And I encourage everybody, register to vote. Google, how do I register to vote? And find a way, register to vote. And in most states, you can register to vote by mail. And I know with Corona, things are crazy, but register to vote by mail. And then listen, CAIR as an institution cannot tell you who to vote for, who to not vote for, because we're nonpartisan. But if there's a PAC in your community, reach out to them. Or on a personal level, like if you live in Florida, I as CAIR Florida's director can't tell you who to vote for. But in a personal capacity, as a friend, I could always tell you who I'm voting for. And if you want to copy me, you have the freedom to do that. But to speak to your leaders and learn who's there, and please make your voice heard at the ballot box. Very important.
So I know that's a very good point that you mentioned, Hassan, about who to vote for and how to figure out who to vote for if we are not as informed on the issues. I think what you mentioned was Jazakallahu great advice about seeking out a PAC near you and knowing what because even at the local level, Hassan, I think that's a lot of us where I struggle with knowing who's got the better policy, that I may not have been as informed throughout the year. So do you have a quick suggestion about that at the local level if I'm trying to figure out who's better for a Muslim population?
Yeah, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and it's very important. In order to do that, it's very easy. I mean, really reach out to your local CAIR chapters, because I know you got an audience over the country, and just if every chapter reaches out and asks, hey, which elected officials have stood by the community when it counted, and which have stood against the community, which elected officials have come seeking the support of the Muslim community, and which have ignored it. So just have conversations, because the truth of the matter is one person can't do it all. So everybody's expertise should be respected. So as a lawyer and as the head of CAIR, people actually come to me sometimes asking for fatwas, and I tell them, I'm not a mufti. We're not muftis. You need a mufti. I'm going to point you the right direction to Darul Ifta, the various mufti organizations. They can give you the fatwa. And likewise, if you're a mufti, but you need to know who to vote for, speak to the people that have the record of serving the community genuinely and looking out for the community interests, and ask them, hey, have you compiled a voter recommendation list that we can personally share on the WhatsApp? Now with WhatsApp, we can spread a message viral. So just speak with, in Chicago, Ahmed Rihab is definitely a great person to contact. Again, as CAIR, he can't officially tell you who to vote for, but I'm sure on a personal level, he could come up with a list. Maybe there's other organizations that focus on politics locally that he trusts. You work with them, inshallah, and spread the word out and amplify each other's voices.
MashaAllah. Jazakallahu khair. Jazakallahu khair.
Brother Hassan, so we were talking about a little bit before about how the Muslim community is. Actually, I was just searching you up on YouTube yesterday just to see what are the topics you've been speaking about. And wow, I saw one of the interview 5 years ago that you had on Fox. I was like, my God. So, it's so tough. I don't know how you have sabr. So actually, I wanted to get to something else. I want to talk about, self-defense. But now that I just said that, how do you actually seriously handle yourself when in these type of extremely aggressive, bigoted
Yeah.
people that you get interviewed with, and you keep your calm and cool? It's amazing.
Mashallah.
What's and I mean, there's not, unfortunately, there's not enough people like that. Do you actually see the benefit of going into the lion's den, or if you want to call it, I don't know if that's the right word, but going into these avenues where they're completely biased. They are not looking for the truth. They're trying to find some useless fake dirt on the person they're interviewing. Do you feel that those interviews have benefited the deen or in any way? Or you're
So two
okay?
questions. So basically, two questions: how to remain calm, and are they worthwhile? And the answer to the first is "Ala bidhikrillah tatma'innul qulub." Really, you can tell the difference of which interviews I did some dhikr before and which ones I didn't by my reaction. Truly, and my father taught me this. That before you start the interview, take your subhan, tasbih out of your hand, do some tasbih, do some dhikr. And just remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make your intention you're speaking for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and only to seek His pleasure. And you're not talking to the person who's in front of you. Of course, the niyyah is speaking for Allah. But in terms of the means, the audience that's watching is who you're trying to convince, not the person who's in front of you. And just so we do the du'as, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli, Allahumma tabarra'tu min hawli wa quwwati wa tamassaktu bi hawlika wa quwwatak, yani putting your trust in Allah, tawakkaltu ala Allah, the various du'as and some dhikr. And I mean it, I'm not exaggerating. Like, they see me, the people of the studio know me, I have my tasbih, I'll do some dhikr, and that really helps calm the situation, the du'as ahead of time. And then remember, idfa billati ahsan. If I'm gonna shout at him, if I'm gonna engage with harshness back, I'm not necessarily going to be able to convince him or the audience. So, just remembering the sunnah of how to interact with hatred and just somebody sent me, an old man on Facebook yesterday, sent me a nasty message. He was like, eat some garbage word and die. And I told him, eat healthy and live long. And he was shocked by that response. He didn't know how to respond to me at that point. So just idfa billati ahsan, because it isn't about our ego. فَإِنَّهُمْ لَا يُكَذِّبُونَكَ وَلَكِنَّ الظَّالِمِينَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ يَجْحَدُونَ. You should have some sorrow for them. Haram, there's so much loss in dalala. So you have empathy. You know what? You actually have some pity for them that they're so lost in their dalala. But sometimes izzah is needed. And there were a couple times that I was actually very aggressive as well. And you need to be aggressive. So there's a trade-off. And what I've experienced is, and yes, I do think it's worth it. Now, here's the deal. If you go on, say, Fox News, and the guy that you're debating is a jerk, and if you still remain calm and respectful, the audience actually sees that. And I've done that so many times where I get so many messages from even Fox News supporters saying, man, I was a big fan of this host until I saw how unfair they were to you, how abusive they were, and how calm you were. And and they've really changed their positions. People have gone from being anti-Muslim to support of the community. We've gotten a lot of messages of support of people, alhamdulillah, who changed their minds after they saw us representing our community with dignity, alhamdulillah. But I do notice that if you're soft, this is my experience, if you're gentle, I notice that the non-Muslim community supports you more and is empathetic and maybe convinced more. But the Muslim community sometimes feel a little disheartened that, oh man, he was talking bad to you. You should have, you should have been put him in his place, which is understandable. And the opposite is true. What I've noticed is if you're aggressive and tough, then the non-Muslim audience sometimes becomes defensive, or the conservative, like Republican Trump supporting audience, may become defensive. But the Muslim community will feel strength and courage and will appreciate that. So in my experience, sometimes you want to motivate the community, so you speak with more assertiveness and aggressive, and you put them in place and you prove them wrong, and you're successful and you win the argument. But sometimes when you win the argument, you will lose the people you're trying to convince who are against you. And sometimes you go softer and you win in a gentle way, and through your gentleness, you convince those that disagree with you, but you may not necessarily give the pride that the Muslim community is looking for. So it's each circumstance. You need to approach it differently based on what your goals are with that interview. But you go with intention, you go with preparation, you go with talking points, knowing how to speak and what message you want to deliver, and then some dhikr before, and then Bismillah.
MashaAllah, that's amazing. In the same vein, there's a big point of trying to convince and bring over people who are traditionally not may not be open-minded. And I can completely understand that that's the goal when you go on Fox News, is that you're bringing a different viewpoint in front of these people that may not have any other point of view except what's being shoved down their throats through whatever media outlet that they're listening to. How important do you feel that in this, like you helping change other people's minds, and then like bridge building and trying to get this viewpoint across to people who may not necessarily 100% agree with you, but at least will respect it and will maybe inshallah change their minds based on your interactions. What do you think about how that would work?
Look, I think we need to use every single avenue to convey our message and to let people hear from us about what our faith and what our community is about. The enemies of Islam are spending hundreds of millions of dollars across many platforms to dehumanize us, and that dehumanization enables the destruction of American liberty, because it undermines the freedom of the Muslim community in America. And when Muslims lose their rights in America, everyone in America loses their rights, because when you take it from one, you take it from all. And it also enables the deaths of millions of Muslims throughout the world, because basically the United States, we have to be clear, yes, it's given us a lot more freedom to practice our faith domestically, but it's also been instrumental in military actions that have taken the lives of millions of civilians abroad, and nobody is in a better position to change that than Muslims in America. And we cannot, and of course should not, and are not able to stop it by force. But we can definitely stop it, inshallah, through political pressure and media engagement. So what I mean by that is basically the government of the United States could not get away with the embargo of Iraq, which led to the deaths of 500,000 civilians, if the American people saw the children of Iraq, who are brown and Muslim, as equal to their white Christian children. So when Madeleine Albright was asked about the 500,000 children that died in Iraq due to US sanctions, she said the price is worth it. And she said the price is worth it because the Islamophobia industry dehumanized the Muslim victims of American foreign policy. It's very easy for the public to support that when they're dehumanized. So any opportunity we can to get on Fox News, to get on national media, to get on social media even, and utilize that to humanize our community, and not just simply claim that we are equal, but that we have something to offer, that what we have gives life, gives hope, gives strength, gives faith, gives happiness, gives tranquility. And we have we don't want to take, we want to give. And when we can utilize all available means, then alhamdulillah, because remember, what do we call those whom Allah sent? We call them rusul. They had a message, they were messengers. And likewise, the media, I think, is just a way to get the message out. But it isn't sufficient. I do think we are lacking in media. And the example I give is in most Muslim communities, you'll have hundreds of thousands of Muslims, tens of thousands of Muslims, but you won't even have one full-time person whose job is to engage the media. So we definitely need to invest in that. If it's important, we should invest, and we should have people engaging the media full-time and professionally. But I will also say we don't want to be falling into sort of the situation of abasa wa tawalla, that we turn away from the people in the streets. We turn away from those that are poor, that are needy, that we can serve in our own neighborhoods, just to focus on the media. I don't think we're doing enough media work to begin with, so we do need to do more, but that is not an excuse to forget the real work, which is ultimately going to be on the ground in communities, through service, through helping the poor and the needy, and just giving back to the societies who need our help. So it takes both. We should invest in media work to reach the masses, but we should amplify that with the real work on the ground. And that's what enables us to be effective on the media. The reason Fox News, we used to call us, they haven't as much recently, now maybe it's because we beat them up too much, but they would call us because alhamdulillah, we're doing the grassroots work on the ground as well. So each one feeds into the other.
So, Jazakallahu Hassan. I was gonna, ask a very simple question that I'm curious about. First of all, when are you running for president, Hassan? That's the first question.
Allah protect us. Allah protect us.
Inshallah, one day. And then the other, the serious question was, I'm wondering what's on your what does Hassan Shibly subscribe to? Which journals, which newspapers is he reading? Because to be informed, you have to know where to go to be informed. And that's one part of my question. Just to add one thing to what you said earlier, I make dua that the Muslim community really branches out outside of IT and medicine, and we inspire our children to do things like journalism and to major in journalism and to pursue these things that the community really is lacking in. So Jazakallahu Khair for sharing that. It's really hopefully in the next generation we can see that. Hopefully within the next 10 years we start seeing more and more media presence. But going back to that question, what do you read? What's your sort of your go-to to stay informed?
That's a great question. One is just by virtue of being part of the CAIR network. Alhamdulillah, we have internal communications every day with reports, with updates. I had a staff member, and I still do, whose sole job is to go through the media and see what are issues of importance to us as the Muslim community. So that was always, very helpful. I used to subscribe, and I don't think they might have changed its name right now, but it's called the Bill of Rights Defense Committee. And that would also give us daily updates about laws, about attempts, about news stories that undermine our freedom. But to be honest with you, Sheikh, now one of the issues that is giving me a lot of anxiety and stress, of late is I'm sitting right now in my office, and alhamdulillah, I see so many books. And I was, I picked one up earlier today, but we have so much work to do that we're struggling to make the proper time to read. And, so I've become a fan of those sort of 12-minute, there's different apps out there that summarize different books and summarize different topics, because we definitely need to make more time to read, but there's a lot of great services out there for reading as well. But I would encourage everybody, join your local CAIR listserv and the CAIR National listserv. And it's important to remember that CAIR National is a separate entity that's separately funded and operated, and then CAIR Chicago is its own. CAIR Florida is its own. We work together, we complement each other. But the very minimum, if you join the CAIR National listserv, you will get an email, almost every day that summarize what important issues are relevant to the Muslim community. And also, if you follow your local CAIR chapter, you'll see what issues are impacting you locally. And then finally, I really think most important, and this is something we're missing, I think, in our communities locally across the US, but you gotta attend some weekly halaqah, whether virtually or physically, because that's what gives us our faith. That's what gives us our strength. That's what gives us our hope and our inspiration. And it's more important than everything. I think people spend too much time on the news, and I think the news creates anxiety and depression, and it's important to be informed. But if you're watching CNN every day and you can't attend a halaqah once a week, you're gonna live a very depressed life, because الشيطان يعدكم الفقر, ويأمركم بالفحشاء. Shaitan promises you poverty and orders you to indecency, and that's what the media does. Whereas the Deen gives us hope, gives us strength, gives us courage. So I appreciate you asking sort of what are the good journals and different things to subscribe to. But honestly, if we can just stick to a weekly halaqah with our local mashayikh, that's going to be more beneficial than everything else, bi'idhnillah. And then for the political stuff, you can follow the CAIR newsletter, inshallah.
Inshallah. So Musab, I think we have to, once the gym is open, we're gonna call Hassan down, set him up nice in a hotel, and he's gonna come hang out with us. You play sports, Hassan?
Man, I've been getting a belly lately. Astaghfirullah. I need to hit the gym again.
So man, there we go. We have like a world-class basketball gym that's gonna be forming. All the kids we'll get you down here. We'll show you a good time. So you got to come down to Chicago. And
I would love to. Allah would love to. I used to wrestle in high school. My grandfather was an undefeated Olympic wrestler. So in high school, I picked up wrestling. But I really enjoy, to be honest, the Sunnah sports. So what I like to call Sunnah sports, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but swimming, alhamdulillah, in Florida is an easy sport to keep. The weather's always nice year round. Archery, so archery, and even, if it can be done safely, I encourage people to know how to safely use a firearm, with the warning that, listen, the average person is more likely to accidentally hurt a family member than use it for self-defense. So keep that in mind. But again, many of us, I don't think we're average people. Alhamdulillah, we do have a sense of responsibility, and we're under extra threats. I mean, we get death threats all the time. So it's very important to know how to safely operate firearms. We shouldn't be chickens for the roosting. People should know that we know how to defend ourselves and we have the physical means to defend ourselves if necessary. You know, if somebody breaks into your home, it can take 5 minutes for 911 to show up. It could take 10 minutes, it could take 15 minutes, but it'll take less than 3 seconds to get whatever you need to defend yourself, if you know what I'm saying. So, you know, that, and horseback riding, I mean, it's a beautiful, you know, so recently this weekend we did some horseback riding as well. But Rasulullah really, you know, he encouraged us to pursue those sports and those activities like swimming, horseback riding, and archery that will benefit us in this dunya and are a fun form of competition and enjoyment and entertainment as well. So that's been one of my messages recently, which is make our passion a form of ibadah. Whatever you enjoy, make the intention that it can benefit the community. I've always wanted to be a pilot, so I started flying again with my intention being that if I have a client in Miami that I need to meet, I can get to them within an hour right away, you know, alhamdulillah, you know, that's the intention.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
MashaAllah, Jazakallahu Khair. So alhamdulillah, you're going to be joining Chicago. You're going to be coming to Chicago August 4th weekend, correct? So
yes, the first weekend of August, inshallah.
Yeah. So inshallah, we'll try to have you, here in the masjid, see if we can do it. Hopefully in the next month, things will open up even further and we can have a program. Oh, unfortunately, everything is, as I'm sure in Florida too, things have all kind of moved on to virtual platforms. There's very little happening in person, but we'll see. Hopefully, inshallah, August 4th, definitely. We'll try.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, they just closed. They shut down the sale of alcohol at bars again in Florida. So that's a blessing. I wish people, and I was saying, if only we feared the akhirah as much as we feared COVID, we'd be in good shape.
Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar.
Jazakallah Khair, Brother Hassan. Alhamdulillah, we had a beautiful time with you, and we hope inshallah others also will take heed to what you've shared, and may Allah grant you and your whole family protection and all of your, may Allah grant you bitanatun salihah, and may Allah allow other young talented male and female brothers and sisters from the community to walk in your footsteps. What I'm sure all of you notice, it's not about just political activism. It's not about just being a lawyer and fighting in court. It's about doing the tahajjud at night, doing the dhikr, keeping your relationship with your mashayikh and with your teachers. That's going to give you the spiritual energy to be successful in your daily effort. And mashallah, Brother Hassan, may Allah make you better than what we think of you. But you're a great role model and example, which I think the community rarely sees. Someone who's right there in front on Fox News or NPR and New York Times, and is defending the Muslims' rights, but at the same time, alhamdulillah, is very closely connected to his teachers and to his mashayikh. Alhamdulillah, that's an awesome example for us to emulate and follow. Barakallah feekum for your time.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakumullahu Khairan. Really, it's a blessing to have your husn al-dhan, your love, your support. At the end of the day, alhamdulillah, whatever khair people see is Allah's rahmah reflected off of the company of the salihin like yourselves that Allah's given us company with, and Allah, alhamdulillah, has protected us. And we just ask all of you for your continued du'as and just your du'as, really. That's all we need. That is the best thing. And that's why we do the work we do at CAIR. Alhamdulillah, it's so that our ulama and our mashayikh can continue doing the real work of deen. And it's a tremendous honor that despite our many shortcomings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed us to play a small role in supporting people to freely practice their deen. That's a blessing from Allah. So Jazakumullahu Khairun. Keep us in your du'as, and hopefully we see you in Chicago soon, inshallah.
Nice, man.